Hi, class. It's Dr. Lindner. Let's take a look at the 11 systems. And you should be familiar with just some of the main parts and basic function at this point. So, um, one of the first systems that we'll get into in anatomy and physiology is going to be the integumentary system, which is everything you see on the outside, right? Everything you see on the outside is the skin, the hair, fingernails, the toenails. We have sweat glands and oil glands, everything on the outside. And the integumentary system, its primary job is to really protect us, protect the inside of the human body. It helps to regulate body temperature. The skin is involved in eliminating waste products, right? If you've ever had a fever and you sweat, you're eliminating so many wastes through the perspiration. The skin is involved with vitamin D production. Really? The skin's involved with vitamin D? Absolutely, because we have UV B rays that come in and it hits the cholesterol on the skin. We have this subcutaneous cholesterol that's on the skin. And then those precursors end up going to an organ over here called the liver. That's the first pit stop. So you need the skin first, you need the liver second, and then third, we have two kidneys. So the liver makes other vitamin D precursors, and it goes to the kidneys, and the kidneys make the bioavailable form of vitamin D. And it's really important to get the vitamin D checked, especially living in the Northeast. We should be getting it checked at least twice a year in the summer months and in the winter months. And on the blood work, on your labs, it's something that's called 25 hydroxide. Okay. And they say the normal range is somewhere between 30 and 100, but ideal, you want to be somewhere between 55 and 60. Okay. And in the Northeast, because we're not really exposed to direct sunlight from like mid-September to mid-May, that's why vitamin D supplementation is so very, very important. But what a lot of people don't know is that when they take vitamin D, it should also be associated with vitamin K in the formulation. If it doesn't have vitamin K, you're prone to getting calcification of the blood vessels, which raises your blood pressure. Vitamin K, we know that vitamin D allows you to absorb calcium. Vitamin D allows you to absorb calcium, but now that the calcium is in your blood vessels, you want to try and get it in the bones. And if you don't have enough vitamin K, the calcium stays in the blood vessels and you get what's called vascular calcification. If the blood vessels calcify and they can't dilate, that means your blood pressure goes up. So there's been studies that link vitamin D with high blood pressure. In the title, in the heading, it doesn't sound good. And it's not that vitamin D causes high blood pressure. It's really vitamin D in the absence of a vitamin K deficiency. So when you have calcium in your blood, vitamin K helps to bring it into the bone. And that's why it's so very important. Not to take K by itself, but the good nutraceutical companies actually make vitamin D, or what you should be taking D3, with K in that formulation. And you get it checked in the winter months and the summer months because in the winter, we probably need to supplement. In the summer, not so much if you're outside, or at least you adjust the dosage of vitamin D that you're taking. That's an important concept. If you wear sunscreen, anything over an 8, you're not making any vitamin D. So I like to get UV rays for about 20 to 30 minutes without anything. And in that time frame, you can make around 20 to 25,000 international units of vitamin D just from that amount of time. Okay. If you're lighter complexion, then less time. And if you're darker complexion, you may need a little bit more time to make that. Okay. That's the beauty of this vitamin. It's really a hormone. We call it a vitamin when we take it, but the body can actually make it, which makes it a hormone. Pretty cool. All right, so the skeletal system, when I teach the skeletal system, we do have 206 bones in the human body. We'll discuss it by looking at what we have in the center first. We call that the axial skeleton. And then in lab, you'll do the upper and the lower extremities, and that's called the appendicular skeleton. And that's a great way of studying it. Study the axial skeleton first, then study the upper extremities, and then the lower extremities. And the bones are really important because they support the human body. It protects us. What do we mean by protection? Well, the skull protects the brain, the ribs, they're going to protect the heart and the lungs. Your spinal column will protect the spinal cord. Your pelvis is going to protect the reproductive organs and a lot of the digestive organs. And the skeleton acts as a reservoir. It's a reservoir because it's going to store a lot of minerals. It's going to store, like when you eat food, your body's going to utilize a lot of the minerals, but that which it's not using, it can put deep in the bones like a bank. It'll put it in there as a reserve. And as your body needs it, it can pull them out. Inside the bone, we have bone marrow, and that's responsible for producing blood cells, both red blood cells and white blood cells. And muscles attach to bones. When muscles attach to the bones and they contract, it can move our skeleton. Speaking of muscles, there's over 600 muscles in the body, and muscle is one of those 4 types of tissue. There's skeletal muscle, which is what we see here in the picture, any muscle that attaches to a skeleton. We also have smooth muscle, and we have cardiac muscle. So we have skeletal muscle, we have skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle. In the picture, we're looking at skeletal. Smooth muscle is around your blood vessels. It's around your blood vessels, and it's around your organs. Like a woman's uterus during that time of month, she may have cramps because the uterus is contracting. When a woman's in labor, the uterus contracts. Those contractions come from smooth muscle, and you don't have voluntary control over that. Skeletal muscle, you have conscious voluntary control over that. Cardiac muscle relating to the heart, you can't consciously accelerate your heartbeat. You can't go from 72 beats per minute to 92 beats a minute on command. So smooth muscle and cardiac muscle are involuntary. Skeletal muscle is voluntary. These muscles, when they contract, they generate heat. If you ever exercise, when your muscles are contracting, you get hot and you sweat. If you have a fever, sometimes your muscles shiver. You feel cold, and the muscles shiver to generate more heat to raise your body temperature. Muscles contract to provide movement, and muscles contract isometrically to just maintain posture. You don't even have to think about it, and it works, and it does its thing. And when you study the muscular system in lab, you'll talk about it going through muscles of the trunk and the head, neck, and trunk first, and then you'll end up doing the upper extremities and the lower extremities as well. So we will be doing in AMP1, we will be covering the integument, we will be covering the skeletal system, we will be covering the muscles and muscle physiology, and we will be covering the neural system, which is the first system that develops. Embryologically, it happens somewhere around day 18. After sperm and egg come together, the very first thing that develops is the neural system. It's just not called the neural system. Embryologically, they call it the primitive streak, and the primitive streak becomes the notochord. and the notochord becomes the brain and spinal cord. But it is the first system that develops embryologically. And much like a tree, you have like the roots, the tree trunk, and then you have branches off the tree. And then from these nerves, at the ends of these nerves, just like when springtime comes and you look at the end of branches, you start to see buds. And from the buds, they turn into leaves, or they turn into flowers, or they turn into fruit. At the end of these nerves, embryologically, there are buds. And if it's a heart bud, it grows into the heart. And if they're lung buds, it grows into the lung. And if it's the liver bud, it grows into the liver. If they're kidney buds, it grows into the kidneys. And the brain sends messages down the spinal cord out to the nerves that regulate and control their function. The neural system takes information from the outside world and it brings it up into the brain so that you can process it. That information, as it comes up and in, is called sensory information. You're sensing things. And then after the brain processes the information, a motor command goes down the spinal cord and out, maybe to your muscles, maybe to the organs. And the information as it descends and goes out is called motor information. So there's sensory input coming in and motor output going out. There are sensory neurons delivering information in, and there's motor neurons bringing information out. So it's always processing and interpreting information from the external and internal environment and tries to figure out how it needs to react or respond to that. It can make muscles contract, it can make glands secrete things. So that's the purpose of the brain and the spinal cord and the nerves. When we learn about it, the brain and the spinal cord alone, we call that the central neural system. The brain and the spinal cord, being that it's in the center, is called the brain, and spinal cord is called the central neural system. And all the other neurological structures that you see, like all the spinal nerves, those are part of the PNS, which is called the peripheral neural system. The peripheral neural system. So the central neural system is the brain and spinal cord. All the nerves, whether they're spinal nerves or even nerves that come off the brain that are cranial nerves, those are part of the peripheral neural system. Now, the neural system does control and coordinate the functions of the body, and it does so in conjunction with the endocrine system. The endocrine system uses hormones to help regulate different functions. And we have these little glands scattered throughout the body. Some of them are in the brain. So the hypothalamus we'll learn about when we do neurology, but it's a link between the neural system and the endocrine system. The pineal gland and pituitary gland, those are all found in the brain, all three of these. So they're discussed when we do the neurology, but these three are also discussed when we get into endocrinology. Your thyroid gland that's in your throat, that's an endocrine gland. The adrenal gland. If we look at the word adrenal, we see renal, which means kidney, and add means you're bringing something towards midline or you're adding something to it. So if you add something to the kidney, that's the adrenal, and they are just above each kidney. The pancreas, the testes, and the ovaries, even though these are part of the reproductive tract, the testes produce testosterone. The ovaries produce estrogen and progestins. And behind the thyroid, behind it on the posterior, which means the back side, we have parathyroid glands. So all different parts of the endocrine system, they work in conjunction with the neural system. But there's a difference between these systems. If we talk about the neural system, when you're exercising, you're going to feel your heart rate go up and you're going to breathe a little bit quicker. If you're on a treadmill running, your neural system reacts and you're going to huff and puff and you're going to sweat. But then as soon as the treadmill stops, within 5 minutes or 10 minutes, everything goes back to homeostasis or to balance, and your heart rate goes back to normal and your breathing goes back to normal. And you may cool off, you're not as hot. So it responds pretty quickly, the neural system. But the endocrine system, it takes a longer time. Like the effects of estrogen and testosterone, they last long. It doesn't last for just 5 minutes. When you're driving to a store and you see a parking spot at the mall and you want to take the parking spot, but someone is rude and cuts you off and steals the spot before you, you get angry. You were waiting there for 15 minutes. That spot should have been yours. So you get out of the car and you go, what are you doing? The other person gets out with a bat. Oh my God, you run back to your car, you lock it. That person takes the bat, hits your car, breaks your windows. What do you feel instantly? You feel your heart racing, you're breathing quickly, your pupils are dilated, you feel nauseous, you feel this knot in the pit of your stomach, you got this adrenaline rush, and you can throw up from it. You can get nauseous and sick. Now that happens. What happens 5, 10 minutes later? You still feel nauseous and sick. What happens an hour or two later when a friend says, hey, you want to grab coffee or grab a bite to eat? You go, oh, I can't even think about food. This person cut me off. I almost lost my life. We got into an argument, and I just feel sick to my stomach. That's because the adrenaline and all those hormones have a much longer lasting effect. That's the endocrine system. Now, how do the hormones get from place to place? They travel in the blood. So you need the cardiovascular system to help pump and move hormones, nutrients, waste products. You need the heart to pump oxygenated blood to all the parts of your body, pump hormones to different parts of the body, to regulate pH, to remove carbon dioxide. So the cardiovascular system is extremely, extremely important. The lymphatic system, also the immune system, this is like a parallel circulatory system. You have lymph nodes everywhere. You have them in the neck. You have them in the mouth, the tonsils. You have them around the breast tissue, the mammary glands. You have them in the armpit. You have lymph nodes in your arm. You have lymph nodes throughout the digestive tract. You got your spleen, your thymus gland. You got lymph nodes in the groin. You have red bone marrow. You got lymph. Lymph is everywhere. And what it's trying to do is that it returns protein and fluid to the blood. It carries lipids, which are fats, from the gastrointestinal tract to the blood. Okay, so your fat soluble stuff like vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and K, all the fat soluble stuff is carried through the lymphatic system. Okay, but all the water soluble stuff goes in the blood. The immune system or the lymphatic system is responsible for pushing out T cells and B cells, again, part of the immune system. And it tries to filter and return clear, clean fluid back into the bloodstream. It just cleans out all the interstitial fluid. Interstitial means it's the stuff between the cells. Interstitial fluid is the stuff between the cells. That's interstitial fluid. The respiratory system, like the nasal cavity, the trachea, the lungs, the alveoli, the bronchi, all these parts are primarily designed, we breathe in air, and in air we're taking in oxygen for the sole purpose of getting that into the cell where we have the mitochondria. And the mitochondria's job is to produce energy in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. But in order to make energy, we need oxygen. Oxygen is needed for that. And when the mitochondria of the cell makes ATP or makes energy, the byproduct of that it pushes off is CO2, carbon dioxide, and that's what we're breathing out, the CO2. And the respiratory tract is also involved in helping produce sound when you speak. And the lungs are also involved in regulating acid base balance. Whenever you see acid base balance, that refers to pH, which means potential or percent hydrogen. And the pH scale goes like this. It goes from 0 to 14. 0 to 14. And in the middle is 7. That's neutral. And any pH from 0 to like 6.999999999 is an acid, and anything above 7 to 14 is a base, also known as an alkaline or alkalinic. Alkaline or alkalinic. So just to give you an idea, like your blood pH is somewhere around here, which is like 7.4. That's your blood pH. But your stomach pH is way down here, like 2.3, which is acidic. So acid and base balance is very important. Women know this better than guys, but if you have a pool, measuring pH is important. If you have a fish tank, measuring pH is important. If you're a farmer or you like to grow crops in your yard, acid base balance of the soil is important. Women know acid base balance is important because if the pH of the vaginal area is off, different bacteria can grow, bacterial vaginosis. And you hear about this fad of people drinking pH water. Well, I drink a pH water of 10, or I drink a pH water of 14, and I want to try and alkalinize my body because cancer can't live in an alkalinic environment, right? You can't, there's no such thing as alkalinizing the body. There's no such thing as alkalinizing the body because every body tissue has a different type of pH. The vaginal pH is different than the skin pH, is different than the mouth pH, different than the lung pH, different than the stomach pH, different than the blood pH. You can't get them all sync and aligned with the blood pH of 7.4. If you raise the pH of the stomach from 2.3 and you drink nothing but alkaline water, the stomach pH starts to rise. And now, if you don't have acid in the stomach, how do you break down your proteins? If the stomach is not acidic, you get bacterial overgrowth in your stomach. If the stomach isn't acidic, you can't absorb calcium or iron or B12. So you can't play around with that stuff. pH is extremely important, and the body knows how to keep it in check. The digestive tract or the digestive system, the digestive tract, the main reason why we eat is to take in proteins, carbs, and fats. And when we take these down, the whole idea is to break the proteins down into amino acids, break the carbohydrates down into glucose, and break down the fats into triglycerides. And these are what the body can utilize for energy because it's going to find a way to make it into the mitochondria of the cell. So again, we can make ATP. So that's the primary reason, is to fuel the body. Carbohydrates are the preferred fuel for the mitochondria to generate ATP. Fats are important for the cell membrane. Carbohydrates are important for the cell membrane. And proteins are important for the cell membrane. When you eliminate a food group, you're going to affect the structure of your cell walls, which need carbs, fats, protein, cholesterol. You need all of that stuff for a healthy cell. So if your chemistry is good, your cells are going to be good. If your cells are good, your tissues are good. If your tissues are good, your organs are good. If your organs are good, your systems are good, and the organism is good. You see that? So if you're off on your nutrition and deplete yourself of any of these food groups or any of these macronutrients, proteins, carbs, or fats, and your biochemistry is off balance, then your cell membranes and cells will be off balance. then your tissues are off balance. Your organs are off balance. Your systems are off balance. The organism will be off balance. Okay. So the digestive tract not only takes in food, but it's also responsible for the elimination of wastes. Your body takes from it what it wants and eliminates what it doesn't. And the urinary system is also part of toxin elimination due to urination. So bowel gets rid of the solids and urine gets rid of the liquids. So the kidneys are involved in a few things. It regulates blood pressure, pH, also involved in producing red blood cells. The kidneys have lots of different important functions. It's like the little engine that could. The reproductive tract, we'll get into this in a little bit more in AMP2, but you have the gonads that produce the gametes, which are the sperm in the male and the egg in the female. And when these unite, they form a new organism. The gonads are also involved in producing some hormones like testosterone and estrogen and progesterone. So we'll get into that more in AMP2. Okay, good place to take our next break. Second.